Testing, testing, 1, 2. Hello, ladies and gents. We have a cup of tea. Lovely jubbly. And we are once again clearing the head. I've got a bit of a headache at the moment, so I'm wondering whether emptying an already empty vessel is the reason for that. Creates kind of a vacuum, too much pressure. But let us continue anyway. Why not? We've started, eh? So let's get the Word document. I've actually got it loaded up. I'm ready to go. And I've already found a note which I've read. That's the first time I've decided to read it prior. So we'll start off with a silly one. I say silly, it's just a bit random. Well, it's not actually that random, it's about capitalism, as usual. Because we exist in capitalism, so it's quite easy to talk about. Capitalism and consumption. So capitalism, this is October 2020, encourages the fetishization of consumption, and not just material things, but knowledge as well. Constantly trying to consume and assimilate knowledge is stressful. Sometimes it's good just to rest and enjoy what we have already, if we have any, that is. Otherwise, we're in a constant state of turbulence. Occasionally, I'll put a space there, otherwise it doesn't look right. Occasionally deturbulate. Is that a word? No. It is now. Occasionally deturbulate to deperturbate. And feel great. No, that's not right. There we go. That's what we want. That's only got 2. I'll leave that as 3 and that's 2 just because. Why not? Written after a match of tea and Coccolino Deep, which is a great YouTube channel I recommend. Some cracking mixes before sunrise and a nap on the sofa. So yeah, just a bit of a weird one, that one. Obviously the fetishization of consumption is true. We love to consume. We'll stick with around this kind of time frame, what bins were there in the notes. October 2020. If we value and show respect to those that have the highest consumption, then we encourage more consumption, or potentially encourage more consumption, and are valuing and respecting an act that speeds up the degradation, destruction, and potential extinction. I'm having the word potential in here because obviously I wasn't in a good frame of mind back then, of our and other species of life. Obviously depending upon whether consumption is occurring. Yes, it's interesting how some people, even worship might be a word that would be potentially fitting there. These sorts of people. And October 2020. Defining people by one aspect of them dissuades / disincentivizes rather, empathy and compassion, especially in those that don't deal very well with abstractions. So I've already talked about that, the old stereotypical tribalistic definitive language, and how it facilitates or has the potential to facilitate social division and inhibit social cohesion. What? From October 2020, as stress/turbulence mounts. Entertainment is used to distract, maybe pacify, and therefore hopefully placate the masses in order to try and sustain systemic stability and delay the descent into potential chaos (brackets or systemic change), which might be more stable but might also require a period of turbulent transition. Stimuli to reaction. Obviously the stimulus is a reaction in itself. Stability versus turbulence, order versus chaos. But yeah, that's the old bread and circuses, isn't it? Distract, pacify, and hopefully placate the masses. What have we got here? We've got a vicious cycle next. One of these days we'll talk about something positive, or frame it positively. I promise. Well, maybe I shouldn't promise. I will endeavour. Vicious cycle: deprivation of freedom and autonomy, or at least the sense of freedom and autonomy. And that's got an I in it, right there. And it hasn't got an A in it, right there. Nope, it does have an A in it. It doesn't have the I in it there. There we go. Cause, so deprivation of freedom and autonomy caused by increased compulsory work leads to consumptive coping mechanisms, which leads to increased compulsory work, and therefore more deprivation of the sense of freedom and autonomy. And I put but didn't finish the sentence, so God knows what I was going to say there. Fortunately, I can't remember 4 years ago. I can barely remember yesterday, or even moments ago. Where am I? Who am I? Consumption leads to psychological, spiritual, biological, and ecological degradation, depending on, again, where the consumption is directed. It could be towards consuming in order to reduce further consumption. Technology that facilitates reduced consumption, potentially. And reduced longevity of sentience leads to more consumption as coping mechanisms for increased stress/turbulence caused by the increased consumption. Okay, let's go to that one. Bum, bum, bum. Maybe I should flick away from October 2020 because it seems to be pretty negative. Let's just pick a random place. Oh, this is yesterday. May 2024. Revenge is a negative reaction to those that have reacted negatively, though it may have some positive effects for those that still believe in free will. Catharsis, or potential catharsis. Let's just keep with the random theme. September 2023. Someone with little who is content with little has much more than someone with more who always wants more. Or potentially, anyway. May 2024. The more reasons you give for doing or not doing something, the more they start to sound like excuses. I think that was that's a relatively recent one, so I can kind of remember what that's about. In regards to being called lazy, obviously there's a lot of reasons for what I do, or at least I think there are. Maybe I'm wrong, but obviously if I was to actually go through them all, the more you discuss it, the more you sound like you're just trying to make excuses for certain things. Interesting, that. To believe in free will, we must believe that something about us lies outside the realm of cause and effect. It's extremely warm right now. August 2023. Vast or significant resource disparity. Facilitates social tension / division and reduced systemic longevity. Although, at what point is it vast or significant? That's the continuum conundrum that we face. That is very difficult to give an actual answer to. We got here July 2023. Sometimes, if I can spell, sometimes an addiction to health is unhealthy. Abstraction. The irony. I would say for a time I was a bit obsessed with kind of healthy eating, to the point where it was probably unhealthy, because you do focus on, if you start to focus on more minor and minor details, it becomes quite stressful, or can become quite stressful. Thankfully, I don't do that now. I just eat unhealthily. July 2023. No, June 2023. Oops. In capitalism. Once again, another capitalism thing. In capitalism, nearly everything is designed to get our attention, our time, and our money. And to shape our behavior, to continually get more of the above. It's an economy of addiction. Yeah, as a capitalist, it would be very beneficial to have people addicted to your product or service. As long as it's an addiction that either doesn't kill them, or if it does, there's lots of more people to replace them. If you were to completely detach yourself from a kind of empathy there and focus on profits. Profits. We love profits. December 2022. As a general rule of thumb, general rules of thumb are general rules of thumb. Good God, I've written some shit. Another one from December 2022. Victims create victims. Benefactors create benefactors. And that's just the idea of because free will doesn't exist, anyone who directs negativity outwards and therefore creates victims are a victim themselves of the conditions which facilitated their development of a illness which involves the symptom of directing negativity outwards. Yes, indeed. Right. Let's just scroll randomly down and pick another one. January this year, January 2024. Retirement. It's a stereotypical label, almost universally sought after, and almost universally thought of as a good thing. Which makes sense, since most people's jobs offer them very little in the way of freedom, and you guessed it, autonomy, or at least the illusion of. Some people end up with mental/physical illnesses from retirement. Important to try and avoid, at least I imagine so. Depends what we do/don't do. Sat on our arse, watching TV most of the time, question mark, facilitates illness. Overall lifetime balance between contribution/consumption. So this is really just, if I add this, it's just striking a decent balance between, I'm going to put reactivity versus passivity. Obviously, if we're watching TV, it depends on what we're watching, of course. Whether we're engaging our minds or whether we're letting them turn to mush. Yeah, it completely depends on what we're doing, really. But I don't really want to retire myself. At least at the moment. Maybe I'll think differently when I'm older. But I do want to find some work where I feel like the contribution is higher, shall we say, and yeah, some more kind of illusion of freedom or autonomy would be nice as well. But yeah, I'm not a fan of this if we're just, especially as a lot of retirement is basically just leaning into consumption, so it's like basically just causing a load of work for everyone else, which I don't really like. I don't really like that idea. Obviously, if we think about our lives, the lifetime balance between contribution and consumption as like over a graph, then obviously we don't contribute at all during when we're a baby or a child. And then, of course, if we're aiming, it'll be like a bell curve, essentially. No contribution to start with, supposedly some contribution in the middle, and if we're aiming for retirement, then we're going to have very little contribution, depending on, again, what we do during retirement. And obviously this is just in terms of, time and energy directed towards attempting to benefit society. Obviously we probably contribute to parents' happiness, or at least hopefully. It would be nice, eh? It would be nice. Oh, we'll get rid of that. We've got October 2023. Survival/thrival of the fittest. So the old Darwinian phrase. should really be phrased as survival slash thrival of the luckiest, or anguish slash languish of the unluckiest. I think I mentioned this. I'm pretty sure I've mentioned this before. Anyway, but yeah, I'd be very interested to see what the difference would have been in the world if Darwin had used this phrase rather than this one, because I think the survival of the fittest is something that kind of encourages ego and detracts from like a recognition of the lack of free will, whereas this kind of emphasizes that. So yeah, I think that would make quite a significant difference, but maybe it wouldn't have taken off as much because people like to ascribe credit to themselves if they've done well, or blame to others if they perceive them to be done poorly. So yeah, maybe it wouldn't have taken off at all. Maybe we wouldn't have heard of Darwin if we'd have gone for that phrase. Who knows what would happen in a parallel universe, eh? Aside from those people that are living in one. We got more from October 2023. Technology facilitates intellectual. I can spell intellectual. The irony. Haha. Polarization. Does intelligence polarize naturally due to intelligent people possibly being more diligent? Accidentally double-L'd it. What an L. In terms of their children's learning versus the less, potentially being less. And by less I mean less diligent, potentially. So it's virtuous versus vicious cycles. If that's the case, wouldn't there be a much higher discrepancy in intelligence? Not necessarily, I don't know why I asked that. Or is there quite a high discrepancy relative to our capacity? What would be deemed a high discrepancy? It's all relative, of course. Going back to technology, tool versus weapon. It's a tool in the hands of the diligent, weapon in the hands of the less so. Distraction. Okay, well, I mean, diligent isn't necessarily the only word that's required there, but yeah, essentially it depends on how we use technology. And of course the word potential needs to be used there, as always. Or as most times, or a lot of times, potentially. For the statement to be less attackable, it would be better, well, at least I've realised this, to switch out is for can. The things said as, or framed as certainties, seem to sound better for some reason. First sentence. Technology facilitates intellectual, oh my god, polarization versus technology can facilitate intellectual, oh my god, I cannot spell that, polarization. There we go. And this is something I mentioned in the previous video, I'm pretty sure, about things being framed as certainties tend to sound better. Probably because if we believe they are certainties, then it simplifies the world. And a simple world requires less energy to think of, so maybe it's energy conservation or something of that nature, potentially. Or it could be absolutely nothing to do with that, of course. Scroll down and pick another random one. It's refusing to open the note. Maybe that's a sign. August 2023. Time as a resource. Time scarcity facilitates expediency / convenience. We live in an age of convenience, regardless of the negatives. E.g., choosing the most destructive mode of transport because it's quicker. This can be for occasional events, such as holidays. But also, even on a daily basis, in terms of choice of commute to work, school, etc. The negative repercussions of this transportation expediency aren't usually reflected in the price. It's externalities, which facilitates their usage more so. So, for example, as far as I know, kerosene fuel isn't taxed, or at least isn't taxed with VAT. Therefore, flights are a lot cheaper. Obviously, if you make things cheaper via an effective, well, it's not a subsidy, but it may as well be a subsidy, then people are more likely to do it. Same with animal agriculture. It tends to be subsidized and much more resource intensive. So if we facilitate the most resource intensive reactivities and consumption, then that's obviously not going to be great for systemic longevity. Surely we should be subsidizing the things that are less resource intensive. And maybe subsidies in general aren't great, but I'll think more about that, because obviously it does benefit those who are lower down the socio-economic spectrum. Yes, what? Doing so also funds the destructive mode transport, whilst simultaneously depriving less destructive modes of transport of the of the resources needed to maintain / improve their services. So, for example, public transport. Well, I mean, planes are also public transport. A vicious cycle, and not the good kind of cycle. Terrible. But yeah, so if we're obviously if we're spending resources, if we're purchasing flights, for example, because they're cheaper because of the lack of tax on kerosene or the lack of VAT on kerosene, then that means we're not spending money on the different mode of transport, which means there's less resources going towards that mode of transport, which means its services won't be as good, which means people might not use it as much because the service isn't quite as good. And I'm pretty sure that's what was it, Henry Ford did in America, and that's why there's a lot of focus on individualization of transportation, and public transport apparently is not amazing. Although I've never been, so maybe it is good. But from what I've heard, it's not too ideal. I could, of course, be wrong there. Let's have a look. June 2023. The dynamic. One of these days I'll learn to spell. The dynamic between entertainment and discontent, or discontentment, either one works. When we're discontent, entertainment can help, although can also be used as a coping mechanism, which doesn't necessarily deal with the underlying reason or reasons for discontent. However, one major reason for discontent is working lots of hours in an oppressive, authoritarian, hierarchical system. And the more entertainers there are, the less people there are to share the workload. Hierarchical. Hierarchical. And therefore the greater the discontent, relative to if there were less hours needed to be spent in said workplace. This also brings up the issue of how do we know whether something is an engagement versus a coping mechanism? How do we know whether we're just trying to enjoy ourselves or whether we're trying to cope with not enjoying ourselves in the previous conditions? You know, is having this cup of tea, is that a coping mechanism for because I'm not content unless I have a cup of tea? Or is it an engagement mechanism because I'm engaging with life by having a nice cup of tea? Of course, we can apply this to maybe some stronger drugs and yeah, entertainment and distractions and all these kind of things. I think we'll call it there because it's just gone over the half-an-hour mark. So once again, if you managed to make it through this, then thank you for joining us. Hopefully some of it at least made sense. Do let me know your thoughts if there's any clarifications required, and I shall no doubt be back with more random notes from my phone to continually empty my head and increase the pressure of the vacuum. But yeah, I hope you have a good rest of your day, / week, / time going forward, the future. And yeah, take care of yourself. Peace.